Hi guys, it's me, HD, and welcome tonight to the race review for earlier's 2021 French Grand Prix earlier today on Sunday. Hopefully you guys are doing well, no matter what part of the world you're from, no matter what time it is. Hopefully you are doing well on what is a warm Sunday night for myself. And the Grand Prix earlier, that was a proper good race. It really was. From lap 1 to lap 53, most positions really were up for grabs, and that's what we want. We don't want a race where maybe for the first half of the race it's good, but then it peters out and we're just basically waiting for the race to finish, or vice versa, say the other way round. Today's race again was a proper Grand Prix. Every single lap there was things going on, moves being made, the order changing around constantly. You didn't quite know who was going to finish where. That's Formula One for me. That is exactly what I watch for. That excitement, that unpredictability at times in a Grand Prix. And like I said, today's race, proper Grand Prix, and I really did enjoy it. I wouldn't say it's the best race of the season. My personal favourite was the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix. I thought the first 30, 31 laps, really up until the red flag, I thought that was just brilliant. I loved every minute of it. It did peter out towards the end, but I thought that was still the best Grand Prix of the season so far. But this is close. It definitely is. And it's definitely the best French Grand Prix since 2002, when Schumacher won his 5th World Championship. I'd probably say that Grand Prix was probably the only Grand Prix I could think of in the last 20 years or so, from France, of course, that, really could rival this Grand Prix. So, great race, and of course, in this race review, we'll go through how the teams did. And firstly, of course, we'll get into the battle for victory and how it ebbed and flowed during the race today. Now, if you did not watch the Grand Prix and didn't even see the result of the Grand Prix, let me now get into those results. Of course, you can see on the left-hand side, but let me show you them with the gaps as well. So, Max Verstappen wins his first ever Grand Prix in France, and Red Bull take their first win in France. A big win for Max Verstappen in the World Championship. A really important win for himself. Lewis Hamilton second. Lewis Hamilton today, as we'll get on to, did the best he could. He just simply didn't have the pace in the end. And Mercedes didn't have the pace in the end to hold back Max Verstappen. But like I said, Lewis Hamilton did everything he could. Sergio Perez third. Good drive. Bottas 4th, and then Norris 5th, Ricciardo 6th. Great day for McLaren. This really could be one of those races where McLaren look back on the end of 2021 and think this was what led to us finishing in, whatever position they do finish in, which, they hope it will be 3rd yet again. And then Pierre Gasly 7th, Fernando Alonso 8th, Sebastian Vettel 9th, and Lance Stroll in 10th. Sebastian Vettel, you can actually see there, was not too far away from that Ricciardo, Gasly, and Alonso scrap. If Vettel had pitted, say, 5 laps sooner than he did, Vettel probably would have finished in 6th or 7th. So it could have been better. His pace was very strong at the end, I have to say that. But I can understand why they pitted so late, but it could have been better. It definitely could have been better. But still, at least it was a double points finish for the Aston Martin team. And especially as well, great drive by Lance Stroll. 19th to 10th. That is an amazing drive. And then finishing outside the points. No retirements, by the way, which is a massive shock. Sainz, Russell, Sonoda, Ocon, Giovinazzi, Leclerc, Raikkonen, Latifi, Schumacher, and Mazepin. But let's first get into the battle for victory today between Hamilton and Verstappen, and of course Mercedes and Red Bull. Now at the start, Max Verstappen going into turn 1 maintained the lead, but then live out of camera shot ran wide on the in the entry, I would say, of turn 2, simply because he carried too much speed in to that corner. Now, the wind also may have played a factor in that, but I still think Verstappen really should have held on to it better and should have been more authoritative in, holding on to the lead there through turn 1 and turn 2. Made the mistake. Of course, he did not take to the escape road. And I know there's, some controversy about that, but as far as I'm concerned, Max couldn't really use the escape road because when, at the time he went off track, which is about here, the escape road, half of it's then already gone and he can't really use any more of it. So I don't really see what Max Verstappen could have done any different, and thankfully did not get a penalty for that because it would have been very harsh considering the circumstances. But yeah, Verstappen, critical error, allowing Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes into the lead of the Grand Prix. And I'll be honest, at that point, I thought Lewis Hamilton was going to win the Grand Prix because coming into this race, because of the previous couple French Grand Prix, I thought it's hard to overtake here. I just don't see how Verstappen's really going to make his way past. And really, up until the first pit stop, it looked as though that was the case because Verstappen was about 3 seconds behind Hamilton at the first pit stop. And as you can see here, the gap already this was after 5 or 6 laps, was about 2 seconds and was already building in Lewis Hamilton's favour. Max Verstappen couldn't really keep up in that first stint. But like I said, on lap 19, Max Verstappen came into the pits. The reason he came in was not because he tried to undercut necessarily past Lewis Hamilton. I mean, of course, Red Bull, in an ideal world, every pit stop they make is to climb up a position, but really they were doing it to cover off Valtteri Bottas because I think they were definitely not safe to him, and Bottas was actually closer in the first stint to Verstappen than Verstappen was to Hamilton. So this pit stop, again, was them covering off Bottas, which they had to do. If they didn't, Bottas would have jumped him and Verstappen would have never won the Grand Prix. But then once Verstappen pitted, he came out ahead of Bottas, which of course was very, very important, and then put in an amazing outlap. A Michael Schumacher-esque outlap. And Michael Schumacher, I remember back in the day, used to be really just amazing on the in-laps and the outlaps and, making sure he was as quick as possible up till the pit entry line because he wanted to make sure he got as most time out of himself and the car during those critical phases of the Grand Prix where really positions can be made up. And that's exactly what Max Verstappen did, because then, once Lewis Hamilton pitted a lap later, Verstappen was quick enough that he could do this. Dive down the inside of Lewis Hamilton at turn 1. And this was the game-changing moment, because if Hamilton had maintained the lead coming into turn 1 and had pulled away, which he probably would have done, and broken the DRS that Verstappen possibly could have got from him, I think Lewis Hamilton probably would have won the race. I know Verstappen pitted, later on and, gained a load of time on Lewis Hamilton, but I think Hamilton would have pulled away quite a bit to the point where Verstappen, even if he did try that, ultimately he wouldn't have been successful and he wouldn't have been able to win the race. He probably would have finished in second if he had tried that and had not come out ahead of Hamilton after the first pit stop. But very critical that Verstappen got this done, because this led to him, importantly, holding off Lewis Hamilton and then building a slight gap before his second pit stop. And then, again, because he had that slight gap, he then came out after his second pit stop and knew that he had the advantage and he had the pace to win against a Lewis Hamilton that I wouldn't say was demoralised after this, but definitely not mentally happy, maybe necessarily confident in what was going to happen for the Grand Prix. coming after. So I think definitely Verstappen, this moment right here, was absolutely critical for him winning the race today. Because again, came in around lap 32, lap 33, I think it was, for a fresh set of medium compound tyres, and then decided to push as hard as possible for the 20 laps remaining in the Grand Prix. And firstly, of course, had to get past Valtteri Bottas, who, well, he tried, Bottas. He defended to the inside on the chicane, the turn 8 and 9 chicane, ran wide in the mid part of it, and once he ran wide, Verstappen knew what he had to do, just undercut him through the second part of the chicane, and then get this run on him going through to turn 10. And Bottas, I mean, simply just did not defend well enough for Mercedes to be able to hold Verstappen back for long enough to give Lewis Hamilton that buffer for Lewis Hamilton to win the race. Because if Bottas, if you look back in terms of hindsight, if Lewis Hamilton, if Valtteri Bottas had held up Verstappen for 2 more laps at most, Hamilton would have won the race. That's all, that's how close it was today. But simply, when he was actually forced to defend, Bottas just simply didn't do well enough there. And then once Verstappen caught Hamilton and got on his DRS, it was, I'm sad to announce for any Mercedes or Hamilton fans, it was inevitable that Max Verstappen was going to do this. Dive down the inside onto the entry of the chicane on the Mistral Straight. And Verstappen, of course, got the lead and never looked back. And, of course, won the French Grand Prix. And thoroughly deserved it. The way he's performed this weekend is something I wasn't expecting. I thought Lewis Hamilton would come out on top this weekend and would bounce back in the championship. And I think most people did, honestly. Maybe even Red Bull thought Hamilton and Mercedes would respond to the last couple races where they've not been too strong and have not really capitalised at all. Have Mercedes and Hamilton when they could have. But just again, Verstappen, and I know the Red Bull car this weekend was probably a tad quicker than they expected, but Max Verstappen, he was the man who made the difference this weekend. Again, the Red Bull car is good, but without Verstappen being as good as he is, being as good as he was this weekend, nailing that amazing qualifying lap that he did, and then doing what he did in the race, putting in a great outlap to get ahead of Lewis Hamilton after the first round of pit stops, and then after his second stop to do what he did in terms of relentlessly catching Hamilton, then passing Bottas how he did, and then passing Hamilton. Without Verstappen being as good as he was in those situations, despite Red Bull having a good car, not a great car, a good car this weekend, Red Bull wouldn't have won the Grand Prix. They would have had a car on the podium, of course, but they wouldn't have won the Grand Prix. Max Verstappen, without doubt, made the difference this weekend. And if he's going to win the championship, it's going to have to be like that. Verstappen is going to have to make the difference to be able to beat Lewis Hamilton. Because normally in past championship battles, it's Lewis Hamilton who has made the difference, not him, or not his team, or the car. Of course, it helps, but when it comes to those big moments in a championship fight during a season, it's the drivers that make that big difference to whether they win or lose the championship. And if Verstappen does win the championship, he will look back at this race as a key moment in doing so. For Hamilton and Mercedes, of course, they will be very disappointed because they've been outscored by Red Bull again. The Red Bull extend their lead over Mercedes in the Constructors to, I think, almost 40 points now. The Red Bull still clearly leading the Constructors World Championship. Verstappen, as you'll see later on, is now 12 points clear of Lewis Hamilton going into Austria, or into the Styrian Grand Prix in Austria, if you know what I mean. I mean, of course, at the next Grand Prix, Hamilton could easily claw back some points. You never know what's going to happen. I think it's going to be a very crazy couple races at the Red Bull Ring with a lot of excitement and definitely some contact in there. Because, you know, the track in the last few years has presented us with a lot of controversy, contact, big moments, all of that. So there's no doubt Lewis Hamilton in those 2 races at the Red Bull Ring can respond. But most likely, as long as Verstappen doesn't have a major issue that results in him being outscored by Lewis Hamilton, or possibly being outscored by Lewis Hamilton, Max Verstappen should be winning the next 2 races because historically, Red Bull in the last few years have been great at the Red Bull Ring, and so has Max Verstappen. So, without doubt now, Hamilton and Mercedes are on the back foot. Without doubt. They need, dare I say, if they want to win this year's championship, they're probably going to need to develop this car a tad more. I know, of course, they want to develop next year's car, but I still think Mercedes can win the championship this year. It's just they need to halt this momentum that Red Bull have got. But they just simply cannot at the moment because Mercedes don't have the car that they had back in Spain, back in Portugal. They just don't have that right now. And that's a big problem for them because as long as Red Bull have a car that's basically just as quick as the Mercedes and Max Verstappen is performing how he is, this is going to happen a lot more in 2021. So, like I said, Mercedes have got to improve their car. They've got to bring, if they can, upgrades if they've got any more tokens left. Because, again, they want to win this year's World Championship, which honestly, I think for both teams, if they can develop a bit more on this year's car rather than next year's car, it would be better because at least this year both teams know they can actually win the championship this year. But yeah, for Mercedes, if they're going to win the championship, they've got to get back into a position where they have, say, the type of advantage that Verstappen and Red Bull had from qualifying going into the race. Like they did have, like I said, back in Spain, back in Portugal. They need to get back to that. If they can't, they won't win the championship because Verstappen, even though I'm sure Verstappen will have a couple hiccups along the way, unless Hamilton drives perfectly, then he's not going to win the championship because Red Bull, I would say, at most of the races between now and the end of the season, Red Bull should have a car, with Verstappen especially driving it, that is, without doubt, fully capable of winning those Grand Prix. So Mercedes, they really need to step it up or else they are in big danger of losing this year's World Championship. And for Red Bull, next 2 races at the Red Bull Ring, like I've said, historically they've been very good there. Home race, of course, there's going to be a good crowd there as well, willing them on. I would be surprised, very, very surprised, if Verstappen did not win any of the races at the Red Bull Ring. And honestly, I think as long as he doesn't have any real issues, he will probably win both races because I think the Red Bull car will be stronger than the Mercedes car in Austria. And I think Verstappen at the moment is driving better than Lewis Hamilton. That wasn't, of course, the case a few races ago, but I think right now Verstappen is driving better than Lewis Hamilton. And I think without doubt, the Red Bull Ring, Verstappen has a better way around there than Lewis Hamilton does. So, advantage Verstappen and Red Bull. For Sergio Perez, very good race. I mean, he didn't start well. He was very slow, and he actually blamed that on the wind as to why he was so slow. And he said once it calmed down after a few laps, the first few laps, he was then able to get into a rhythm and set some good pace and deserved the podium because his pace was strong, especially towards the end of the Grand Prix. Yeah, for Red Bull going into the Red Bull Ring again, they are the clear favourites to win both races. Verstappen, of course, the clear favourite to win both races there as well. For Sergio Perez, not sure how he'll be over a single lap in Austria. He should be good. I remember the first of the Austrian Grand Prix races in 2020, Perez was very quick. The Racing Point car wasn't quite as quick as we were expecting that weekend. But Perez, I thought, was pretty quick. So he should be fine, Sergio Perez. And I wouldn't be surprised at all if Perez qualified in the top 3 on the grid, say with Verstappen on pole. But yeah, clearly advantage right now to Red Bull. And for Valtteri Bottas, it's a shame for Bottas because if he had got it together in qualifying, I think Valtteri Bottas could have won this Grand Prix because his pace in the first stint was probably the best out of that front 3. He did actually have the fastest lap of the Grand Prix for a long time in the first 30 or 35 laps of the race. So Bottas had the pace, and then, you know, once Hamilton was jumped by Verstappen after the first pit stop, Bottas was right on Hamilton's heels. So I kind of feel as though if Bottas had got pole position, or at least had out-qualified Lewis Hamilton, I think Bottas probably could have beaten Hamilton today and maybe have won the race. But again, just in qualifying failed to get ahead of Hamilton, which really would have helped his performance. And that's what led to what happened. He was very angry, of course, over team radio that they didn't pit him for a second time because he felt as though if he was on a fresher and probably softer set of tyres like Verstappen, you know, what he did, he felt that he probably would have finished on the podium, which I agree with. And I have to agree as well that, you know, if you're telling your team, you know, my tyres are gone, we need to pit, unless you're in such a great position, I think as a team you've got to listen to the driver, because at the end of the day, the driver is the one driving the car, and he knows exactly how the tyres feel because, you know, they've done millions of laps in their career. Not just in Formula 1, of course. I mean, just in general in their motorsport career. So I think ultimately you need to listen at the end of the day to the driver. And I think in hindsight, if they did, I think Bottas probably would have finished third because Mercedes' pace today was actually good. Just wasn't, because of what Verstappen did on strategy, just wasn't ultimately good enough to win the Grand Prix. So there you go. Hopefully, from a Mercedes point of view, they can bounce back in Austria. Of course, we know Valtteri Bottas in Austria is very good. But can he beat Mad Max Verstappen? Not sure he can. It'll be very interesting to see. If Mercedes do respond in Austria, going to be interesting to see how that's done. I'm not sure they will respond, though. I think the most interesting thing, given the tracks coming up, is when will Mercedes respond? Because it's probably not going to be at the Red Bull Ring, because like I said, I don't think they'll have on pace the car quite good enough to do that. You'd think Silverstone, because Lewis Hamilton, you know, it's his home race, and I'm sure he will literally have given everything that weekend to win. But if it ultimately isn't good enough there, then they are then definitely in deep, deep trouble. But now let's get on to the top 2 midfield teams, at least in the Constructors' Championship. Ferrari first up. Ferrari today was so poor. So poor. And ultimately, that was down to a combination of things. One, Ferrari's poor tyre wear and poor tyre management. Not because of the drivers not able to manage the tyres. It's simply the car wears the tyres out too quickly. Because, you know, we've seen that for the last 2 years. They've clearly not solved that problem. It's still a massive problem for them, which they've got to solve in the future, because, you know, teams who have this problem never end up winning the World Championship. So if they ever want to get back to that level, then they need to solve that problem pronto. And yeah, today that massively affected them, but they did also, in hindsight, pit too early. They pitted, lap 14, 15, which I said at the earliest, you know, the one-stoppers would be coming in. But again, in hindsight, that was too early for them to be pitting. I can understand why they pitted, because they were trying to cover off the McLarens and Gasly. So I can totally understand why they did it. It's just in hindsight, it was not a good decision. In hindsight, they probably should have left it until, especially because they, were already starting on, say, 3-lap-old medium tyres, the two drivers. Probably should have left it till lap 20 or 21, 22 until they pitted. But again, in hindsight, that was the wrong decision. But I think, honestly, more of a concern is that they still have this really bad tyre wear that does plague them, especially in the races. We saw this in Bahrain. This was a problem. Portugal, for Carlos Sainz there, it was a massive problem. They fell back so quickly with Carlos Sainz there. Didn't really get to see it in Spain and Monaco. But then in Baku, we saw it. And then we saw it probably. This is the worst example of it. So, yes, maybe Ferrari pitted too early. But honestly, I don't think they would have finished at all today in a good position, because I just think ultimately their tyre wear is that bad. It would have come back to bite them where it hurts eventually, even if they had pitted, say, 5 laps later than they actually did. So at the end of the day, Ferrari just need to somehow get on top of it. I don't know how they can, because it's clearly a design flaw with the car. The only way they can, I guess, deal with it is by just sticking the hardest compounds of tyre on the car that they can get away with in the race, which actually today they did do, but it was still not good enough. But yeah, Ferrari's tyre wear is just abysmal, and that's why they ended up with no points, which is an embarrassing result. 11th and 16th when they started 5th and 7th. Simply not good enough. But for McLaren, wow, what a day. Who saw these two, Norris and Ricciardo, finishing 5th and 6th? I don't think anyone did. Maybe someone thought Norris would get in the top 5 because of a great drive, but to have both McLarens in 5th and 6th, that is just incredible. It really, really is. 18 points, a massive points haul for them. They now are back into 3rd in the Constructors, which of course they lost in Baku. They now lead by, I think, 16 points to Ferrari, which is a good gap to have, especially going into the next 2 races where I think in the Red Bull Ring, McLaren are going to be very strong, because they have been in the last couple of races there. So McLaren are looking good going out of this Grand Prix, where really you would have expected Ferrari to continue to outscore McLaren. But McLaren, again, big day for them. And like I said earlier, if they do finish ahead of Ferrari in the Constructors, which has got to be their aim for this season, they will look back at this race as a big race that helped them towards it. So, great performance. Ricciardo, I've got to say, great performance. This was probably the biggest indicator that Ricciardo is starting to get used to things at McLaren, I would say, for this race, because it looked a lot more like the old Daniel Ricciardo in the race. Overtaking, was getting after things, wasn't just hanging back and being conservative and not really sure of what he's got. Again, it was a lot better from Ricciardo, and that was great to see. Lando Norris, of course, he went a few laps longer, which really did help his performance and his pace, and his 5th place is just another example of, how great Lando has been this season and how great McLaren's season has been, really. I have to say, Lando Norris, though, especially, what a season he has had. This is his, I'm just trying to think, 3, 4, 5, I think 6th top 5 finish of the last 8 races or something like that. Just incredible. I think Nib told me earlier, I think it might be 8 in the last 10 races that he's finished in the top 5. That's just brilliant. It really is. And as long as he keeps that up, McLaren should finish 3rd in the Constructors' Championship, which again has got to be the aim. But great for McLaren. Very pleased for them. Great to see both drivers doing so well. And the team, again, taking away a very important 18 points. But guys, before we get into the rest of the teams, let me know in the live chat what you thought of the battle for victory between Mercedes and Red Bull, and how things are looking coming out of this race between Hamilton and Verstappen and Mercedes and Red Bull. Also, let me know what you thought about Ferrari and McLaren today. Let me know in the live chat, and also comment section down below as well. Just want to say, guys, don't forget to subscribe. If my throat will allow me to say this. Yeah, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for more content like this, because I will be live 6 times next week as well, of course, for the Styrian Grand Prix in Austria. So don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can subscribe right there, or just go to my channel page and sub there. Whilst you're there, hit the notifications bell, and as well, smash a like button and share this channel everywhere you can. Anyway, let's read out some comments, shall we? And then we'll get on to the rest of the teams. Francisco says Norris has a gigantic lead in the midfield championship standings. Yeah, he does. He really, really does. I mean, I was talking to Nib about this earlier. He's not just miles ahead of the other midfield drivers. He's 17 points ahead of Valtteri Bottas. 17 points after 7 races. How? That McLaren is nowhere near as quick as the Merc. Nowhere near as quick. Yet he's 17 points clear. It's just incredible. Just, again, that illustrates how great he has been this season. And well on his way to being one of the, I think, stars of the season. Up there with Verstappen and Hamilton, without doubt. Right, let's see if there's any other good comments here. Unobjective Personality says 7th top 5 in last 8 races for Norris. Crystal Racing says it's almost like 2020 again for the Ferrari-powered cars, but instead it's due to tyres struggling on abrasive surfaces rather than the engine, which has improved a tiny bit. I'd say it's improved more than a tiny bit. It's definitely improved substantially. I think today, in terms of them getting overtaken, say the Ferrari cars, I think the wind factor, I think, played a role in that. But also, again, if you go back and look at my race preview stream from this morning, where I looked at the sector time data for, you know, what the cars were like in qualifying, Ferrari were almost half a second slower alone in Sector 2. And most of that is just full throttle. So, yeah, they were very poor in that sector. I think if we had raced here a year ago, I think that would have been even worse. So I don't believe that their engine has improved only a tiny bit. I think it is definitely a bit of an improvement. I don't think it's a big improvement. I still think they're lacking a bit to, say, Honda and Mercedes. And when it comes to Renault as well, it looks as though they're lacking a bit there maybe at the moment, because the 2 Renault-powered Alpines were actually quicker than a lot of the Ferrari-powered cars in Sector 2 as well. So, I think we'll see at the Red Bull Ring whether that continues itself, and whether Renault have possibly got got themselves, if I can speak English, back ahead of Ferrari in terms of pure power. But yeah, I think Ferrari, they've still, the weaknesses of last year are still plaguing them when it comes to whether they can compete with Mercedes and Red Bull at the end of the day. They still don't have enough power, but that's a lot closer now between them, Honda and Mercedes, than it was in 2020. But their tyre wear doesn't seem to really have improved this season. Maybe it has a tad, but nothing major. So, yeah, it's a shame. But that's the way it is, unfortunately. Ferrari's still struggling there. Let me find some other comments here in the chat. Jay Foreman says, I know he was on old tyres, but shouldn't have Bottas been better at defending Verstappen a bit longer, or is that a bit too harsh? No, I think it's a worthy criticism. I mean, he made a mistake which made it so easy for Max Verstappen to overtake him, because he knew Verstappen exactly what he needed to do then. All he had to do was do a switchback on Bottas through the second half of the corner, and then he knew as long as he had his car on the inside of Bottas's through turn 10, that he would get the move done, because Bottas would then be on the dirtier outside line, and then Verstappen would have the grip up the inside on fresher tyres to get the move done. So no, I think Bottas could have done better. I mean, he had to defend to the inside like he did, but if he had not gone as wide as he did, then he could have at least made it harder for Verstappen through the fast right-hand turn 10, and could have maybe forced Verstappen to go for a risk down the inside at the Beausset corner, and maybe then something happens there and Verstappen is cost the win or whatever. But I'm not sure it would have been enough, because I think Verstappen maybe still would have ended up passing him into turn 10 anyway, just in a different way. It's hard to say, ultimately. I think you've got a point, but I think also anyone saying that there's nothing really Bottas could have done, I think they've also got a point, if that makes any sense. KG says, get rid of DRS. Well, I agree. I mean, of course, it did lead to a good race today, but honestly, I think we still would have had a good race today, even without DRS, because I think a lot of the overtakes today would have took longer to happen, but they would have happened, because there was a lot of cars out there that were very slow compared to others. So I think we still would have had plenty of overtaking today, especially in the midfield. So I don't think, without DRS, this race wouldn't have been a good race. I think it would have been still a good one, good competitive one in that midfield especially. But yeah, in general, I do agree. And hopefully in a couple years we can get rid of it, because, yeah, I would just rather it not be there. Let me see if there's any other comments here that I can find. Just scroll up. John says, you can't relax, develop the goddamn car and fight for the title. Stupid idea of winning 2022 with a dominant car if you can't win when there is competition. Yeah. It reminds me of BMW back in the day, where in 2008, because 2009 was, the big regulation change for that year was coming very quickly. BMW, who really were the ones who were responsible for cars coming into Formula One, because they really were a big proponent of it. I think they were so confident, because they had really risen up as a team, BMW Sauber. They were so confident in 2009 they'd be even better and probably have the best car, that even though after 7 races they led the championship with, I think, Robert Kubica by 4 points, and I think they actually would have won the championship in 2008 had they developed the car a bit more that season, because Kubica was only, 14, 15 points behind in the end, and I mean, towards the end of the season, Kubica could barely get anywhere near the top 5 in the race results, because his car was no longer a top car and basically a midfield outfit at that point. But again, because they were so confident of 2009, they stopped development, and it cost them big time, because in 2009 they were just a midfield team, and then I think, honestly, out of embarrassment, just pulled out the sport and then blamed it on the global recession, which I'm sure did affect them. But I think it's no coincidence that they had a very embarrassing 2009, did BMW, to be honest. So yeah, considering that example, if I was in charge of Mercedes or Red Bull, I would be saying, we need to develop this car as much as we can dare. Say, up until August, say September at the latest. Because again, next year, yeah, you might have a great car, but they know they have a good car, or good enough car, say Red Bull, this season to win the championship. They won't know for sure next year, until, of course, we get to the actual racing, whether they will be good enough to win a championship. And at least, again, this year, they know that for a fact. And when the chances come to win a championship in Formula One, you've got to go and take them and really, not live with regrets, I guess you could say, about, what if we had, just tried a bit harder with that car that year, we might have won the championship. I think they could get into a position like that where they say, feel as though they made a mistake. So again, if I was Red Bull, I'd develop the car probably up until the end of the European season, which is basically the Dutch Grand Prix at Zandvoort in the second week of September. And then by then, because of the token system, I think Red Bull would have then gone through basically all they can develop at that point, and then, you know, concentrate on next year's car fully. I mean, they've already got, probably already, a very, very, very good idea as to what their exact design is going to be for 2022. So it's not like they haven't started at all on that. They probably are quite well into that project already because the team is so big, and F1 teams are so big that they can easily work on different projects at different times. For example, I remember watching the McLaren or a documentary, I think it was about McLaren, where they were saying that they were already, or that, you know, as soon as the season starts, they already start to focus and develop next year's car. So all the teams have already, to a certain extent, started next year's car. It's just who dares to push things a bit harder this year. Ferrari and Alfa Romeo have announced that they are not developing the car any further this year, by the way, if you guys were interested on that. But, yeah, I'm sure maybe an extra couple months, maybe it will affect them a tad in 2022 in terms of developing next year's car. But if they win the championship this year, then, yeah, maybe if they don't win it next year, fine. But I'd rather win the championship this year than, you know, rather than concentrating on 2022 fully and getting your hopes up that you're gonna win the championship just because you put more time into that car. So yeah, like I've said, I think Red Bull Mercedes should develop as much as they can get away with this season. Anyway, I think we should now get into the rest of the teams. And first off, Aston Martin, whose race pace today was very, very good. Sebastian Vettel, as I said earlier, if he had pitted a bit earlier than he did, he probably would have finished in 6th or 7th place, because he wasn't that far behind Alonso, Gasly, Ricciardo at the end of the Grand Prix. He was only 2 or 3 seconds behind and on much fresher tyres and had very good pace. And actually, if you remember, before Alonso pitted, Vettel had overtaken Alonso, I believe, and was ahead of him. So, really, I mean, good day for Aston Martin. 9th and 10th, that's a good result considering where they started the Grand Prix from. They made progress, of course, on, again, where they've started from, which was P12 and P19. It just could have been more if they got the strategy a bit more right. And I think, in hindsight, they probably should have pitted at the absolute latest, say lap 30-ish. I think they pitted around lap 35, I think, which, again, was a bit too late. So, yeah, I think they just got it a bit wrong there. But still, good result. Massive shout out to Lance Stroll, whose race pace doesn't even surprise me anymore how good it is to come from 19th on the grid to finish in 10th place. If only he could start higher. How many times have we said that in his Formula 1 career? If only he could start a race in a higher position, just imagine what result he would get. So hopefully that can, you know, improve soon. Just trying to think in Austria. I don't think Lance Stroll has really ever qualified well at the Red Bull Ring, so I don't really expect him to do anything there in qualifying. Sebastian Vettel, though, I wouldn't say I expect an amazing performance or anything, but I would definitely expect him to be better there because he historically has done, I'd say, better or more things there than he has done at Paul Ricard. So I would expect him to be a bit stronger at the Red Bull Ring, and I think definitely because of the characteristics of the Aston Martin car and of the Red Bull Ring track, I think Aston Martin are going to be strong. Definitely in the race at the Red Bull Ring. For AlphaTauri, a good race, honestly. Their race pace actually was just as good as their qualifying pace, which has not really been the case Always with AlphaTauri this season, we've tended to see a drop-off in pace in the race compared to what they've done in qualifying at most races this season, but they were pretty good today. Gasly finishing in P7, probably could have got sixth if he had more laps, but he didn't, and he didn't deserve any because he didn't get the move done early enough. But a good result for Gasly. Again, if he had not pit so early compared to, say, Norris, probably could have finished in fifth. This just wasn't to be. So I'm afraid that, you know, the team just got it wrong there, and that really cost the home driver. Of course, everyone at the track was supporting very keenly to go and get a very strong result for the home fans. I got to say, though, Yuki Sonoda, I thought drove well today. Started last, finished in 13th, was up in P12 and wasn't too far away from a points finish. As long as he can cut out these qualifying errors that we've seen, you know, so far this season, I think Sonoda is starting to develop his race pace. So that's what I mean. If he can just cut those qualifying errors out where he ends up starting then from the back of the grid, I think Sonoda does have the potential to score many points this season. So definitely needs to improve on that. But AlphaTauri, I think, will be very pleased because they have scored more points than their direct rivals. Not Alpha. Just trying to think. There's so many A's in that part of the constructors. I'm just trying to think who I'm talking about. Alpine, there you go. And Aston Martin. They outscored, of course, both teams today. Gasly came away with 6 points. Alpine came away with 4. And Aston Martin came away with 3. So in the constructors, it is as it was in that respect. But yeah, good result there for Gasly. And at the Red Bull Ring, I think they're going to be definitely, with both drivers, very strong. The reason I say both drivers is because Yuki Sonoda, I believe, has raced at the Red Bull Ring before, so shouldn't really have an excuse not to be strong there. For Alpine, it was okay. I mean, 8th place, better than what they managed in qualifying, where I think they were quite miffed as to why they were so slow in qualifying compared to what they were doing in practice. I've got to say, though, I am very pleased that Fernando Alonso has now got on top of the car, which we've seen in the last couple of races, because, you know, when he was miles behind Ocon, it was very disappointing to see. It wasn't the Fernando, of course, we know and love. And I think now you are starting to see the Fernando we know and love. The last 2 races from him have been just brilliant. Of course, 6th in Baku and now 8th here in France. And considering the type of circuits coming up, Red Bull Ring, of course, 2 races there. Then Silverstone. Then Hungary, where he's been very good there in the past. I think because those circuits, again, he has such experience there, I wouldn't be surprised if he continues to build on this and ended up becoming a consistent point scorer, because we know how talented he is. And we know that as long as he gets qualifying right, basically meaning as long as he out-qualifies his teammate at least, which I guess is the only way he can really get it right, then he should be good enough to at least contend strongly for a points finish. Esteban Ocon in 14th, disappointing for him. I think simply the team just left him out way too long when he fell behind too many cars and couldn't really make that ground back up, and then ended up finishing actually behind a Williams, which is very embarrassing. But yeah, good for Alonso, good for Alpine. At least they've gained ground on Aston Martin, which I think is a plus. I know it's only 1 point, but it's something. And it is still close between those two. I think there's only like 11 points separating them. So it will possibly, if Alpine do beat Aston Martin in the Constructors later this season, it will be an important extra point over the Aston Martin team. For Alfa Romeo, just didn't have any pace. I think similar to Ocon, just didn't pit early enough. I think what they expected was a Grand Prix where the cars who stayed out longer weren't going to get overtaken as easily as they were, because they thought it'd be a lot harder to overtake in this Grand Prix. than it actually was. And I think that's why Alfa Romeo and probably Alpine thought that, you know, if they'd stayed out as long as they did, that it would work out. But sadly for them, it did not. And then 15th and 17th. Very surprising that they were so slow today after the pit stops. But again, I think that first stint really did cost them, being out way too long on the track. But a shame for them. But I'm sure in Austria, they will try to bounce back with the, you know, how... just trying to find the words to say this. With how... there you go. With how short the lap is... Even if they haven't got the pace in qualifying, again, because how short the lap is, they should still be in some sort of contention in Austria. And actually, at the 2 Austrian Grand Prix last year, they didn't do too bad. They had a points finish in the first one, and then I think they finished 11th and 12th in the second one. So, we'll look out for them at that Grand Prix. And then finally for Williams, I've got to shout out a guy who normally is called Mr. Saturday, but today, it's Mr. Sunday, and that is George Russell. P12, what a result. This has got to be the first time in a while that he's actually progressed on his qualifying result by that much. By 2 positions, which normally, you know, he'll have a great qualifying, Russell, and then just eventually drop back because simply the Williams car doesn't have the race pace of the other cars. But to finish in P12... and to not even be that far behind Sainz. I think he was only 12 seconds in the end behind. Brilliant performance. Really, really great. And I think it just goes again to show that Russell is, without doubt, a very, very good driver that just deserves a bit of a better car, quite frankly. And thankfully for the Williams team, they are now back ahead of Haas in the Constructors because they now have the best result out of those 2 teams. Of course, Haas got back ahead because they finished 13th in Baku, and then Williams have gone one better with P12 here in France. So good for them there. Now, finally, we'll get onto the drivers and constructor standings. I do have to say, though, I don't have the constructor standings available in terms of displaying them, but I will read them out for you guys so you can audibly hear what the standings are. But I can show you, though, the Drivers' Championship top 10. Lewis Hamilton is now 12 points behind the current championship leader, Max Verstappen. Still very close in the championship, without doubt. Sergio Perez is 3rd. Lando Norris 4th, as I said, 17 points clear of Valtteri Bottas. A great performance this season from Norris, only 8 points behind Perez. Again, just shows you how great he's been. Charles Leclerc, of course, scoreless today in 6th. Sainz also scoreless in 7th. And then Gasly 8th. And then 9th is Daniel Ricciardo after a strong day today. And then 10th is Sebastian Vettel. And then in the Constructors, I can read it out to you. Red Bull are in the lead by 37 points. There you go. Yeah, 37 points. Red Bull are in the lead from Mercedes, who are on 178. McLaren are back into 3rd on 110 points, and they are 16 points ahead of Ferrari, who of course didn't score any points, so they're on 94 points as it stands. AlphaTauri have extended their gap in 5th in the Constructors. They are 5th on 45 points. Aston Martin are 6th on 40 points, and then Alpine are 7th on 29. Alfa Romeo are 8th on 2 points. Williams are now 9th because they have the best placed finish so far this season, despite not having a points finish at all. And then, of course, Haas are now back at the very back of the grid in terms of the Constructors' Championship. But, yeah, there you go, guys. That is the race review for the 2021 French Grand Prix, and I have enjoyed this weekend, not this weekend. Yeah, thank you, guys, I have to say, for coming along to the streams this weekend. Been a successful weekend, without doubt, for the channel in terms of views. We've had plenty of views, plenty of new subs as well. And if you are new to the channel, hello to you, and great to have you on board on this new growing channel of ours. And yeah, next weekend I will be live another, or not just next weekend, but next week, Thursday included, of course, I will be live 6 times for the Styrian Grand Prix. The next time I'll be live will be Thursday night at 7 p.m. UK time for the 2021 Styrian Grand Prix preview. And then 10:45 a.m. UK time on Saturday morning, I'll be live for practice 3 for the Styrian Grand Prix. Then live again at 1:30 p.m. UK time for the qualifying for the Styrian Grand Prix. And then again with the new schedule, 3 streams on the Sunday. 11 a.m. UK time, a race preview for the Styrian Grand Prix of 2021. The race watch-along will begin at 1:30 p.m. UK time. And then the race review will be at 7 p.m. UK time. So the same times basically as this weekend. And I think it'll be the same as well for the Austrian Grand Prix too. So yeah, that's the schedule for next week. Just to update you guys as well. Again, I think I've said this, or I think I said this 2 weeks ago. I am planning on uploading videos during the summer break. And I can let you guys know that, I mean, they aren't done, these videos, but I have 5 videos at the moment planned for release during the summer break. So between, let me just look at these notes I've written, between the 3rd and the 19th of August, which is, say, the real core of the summer break. Yeah, I've got 5 videos at the moment, hoping to add another, but if I can't think of another that I think would be good enough that I actually want to do, then it'll just be the 5. And I think you guys will like the videos I'm going to come up with. And it will definitely keep you guys, hopefully, entertained through the summer break. But yeah, that's been it for this weekend. And again, thank you guys very, very much for the support, as always. Just want to say again, don't forget to subscribe to the channel for that content coming next week for the Styrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. Or just go to my channel page and subscribe there and hit the notifications bell. As well, smash the like button, share this stream and channel everywhere you can. Comment down below what you thought of the French Grand Prix of 2021 and what you thought of all of the teams and drivers and the events of the Grand Prix in review. And as well, don't forget to join my Discord server, link below in the description. Best place that is for notifications of my videos and streams. And also, very active server, nearly 500 people in there. Be great. It would really be great if you guys could join the ever-growing community here that we have. But until Thursday night, guys, at 7 p.m. UK time for the preview show for the 2021 Styrian Grand Prix, it has been me, Chazza HD. Goodbye.